Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES horizon and watched the stars bend around them as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel. The blue glow of the quantum drive faded from the viewscreen, replaced by the cold light of distant suns. They had done it. Humanity had finally reached beyond their own solar system. "Captain, we're picking up energy signatures," said Dr. Lisa Carter from her science station. Her voice carried excitement mixed with nervousness. "Multiple sources?" "Sir, very large ones." Commander Ryan Blake stepped forward from his position at the tactical console. "Could be ships, Captain. Big ones if the readings are right." Jake nodded and straightened his uniform. This was the moment they had all trained for first contact with alien life. The entire crew had dreamed of this day, but none of them knew what they would find out here among the stars. "Bring us to yellow alert," Jake ordered. "Open channels on all frequencies. Let's see if anyone wants to talk." The answer came faster than they expected. The viewscreen flickered and showed the face of something that looked like a giant insect. Its compound eyes reflected the bridge lights, and its mandibles clicked as it spoke. "Human vessel, you will identify yourselves and state your business in Zephyrian space." Jake took a deep breath. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the United Earthship Horizon. We come in peace, seeking to establish diplomatic relations with your people." The insectoid alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "Peace is an inefficient concept, humans. You are in territory claimed by the Zephyrian Empire. You will submit to inspection or be destroyed." Before Jake could respond, another voice cut through the communication channel. This one sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "The Zephyrians are hasty as always. I am Speaker Thren of the Vortani Collective. We are curious about your species." A third voice joined the conversation, this one deep and echoing. "The Nethers also watch these newcomers. We wonder if they will prove useful or merely annoying." Jake looked at his crew. This was not how they had imagined first contact would go. 3 different alien species, all talking at once, none of them seeming particularly friendly. "We appreciate your interest," Jake said carefully. "We're explorers from Earth. We've just developed the ability to travel between stars. We're hoping to learn about the galaxy and maybe find some friends along the way." The Zephyrian's mandibles clicked again. "Friends? Another useless concept? The galaxy has no room for friends, only for those who can be useful and those who cannot." Over. The next few hours, the human crew learned about the galactic civilization they had stumbled into. It was vast, spanning thousands of worlds and dozens of species. Trade flowed between the stars, wars were fought and won, and life continued on a scale that made Earth seem tiny and insignificant, but something was wrong with this galactic society. Jake and his crew noticed it in every conversation, every interaction. The aliens they met seemed to care only about profit, power, and survival. They spoke of efficiency and results, never of right and wrong. Dr. Carter was the first to put it into words. "Captain, I've been analyzing their communications for patterns. They have words for justice, mercy, and honor in their languages, but they never use them. It's like these concepts don't exist for them anymore." Commander Blake was more direct. "They're cold, sir. Every last one of them. They talk about other species like they're discussing livestock." The truth became clear when they witnessed their first galactic conflict. The Zephyrians had decided they wanted the mineral rights to a Vortani colony world. The Vortani had refused to sell. The solution was simple and brutal. Jake watched in horror as the Zephyrian fleet surrounded the colony world. Millions of Vortani lived on the surface, their crystal cities glowing like jewels in the planet's twilight. The Zephyrians didn't negotiate further. They didn't issue warnings. They simply opened fire. The planet's surface turned to glass under the orbital bombardment. Every city, every settlement, every living thing was destroyed in a matter of hours. The Zephyrians then landed mining ships and began harvesting the minerals from the molten crust. "Why doesn't anyone stop them?" Jake demanded of Speaker Thren, who had watched the destruction without any visible emotion. "Stop them? Why would we? Zephyrians are stronger. They took what they wanted. This is how the galaxy works, human. The strong survive and the weak Perish it is efficient. But those were innocent people, Dr. Carter protested. They had families, children, dreams. They were inefficient, the nether delegate rumbled. They occupied valuable resources without maximizing their use. Now the resources can be properly exploited. Jake felt sick. This wasn't the galactic community humanity had hoped to find. This was a universe where might made right, where compassion was seen as weakness, and where the strong preyed on the weak without consequence. When he demanded to speak to some kind of galactic authority, he was directed to the Cosmic Council. On Nexus Prime, the journey took 2 weeks, and what he found there was even worse than he had imagined. Overlord Kess, the Council's current leader, was a massive creature that looked like a cross between a spider and a shark. It listened to Jake's protests about the destruction of the Vortani colony with what seemed like amusement. You speak of concepts that died long ago, human, Kess said. Honor, justice, mercy. These are words from the old times when the galaxy was weak and chaotic. We have evolved beyond such inefficiencies. Evolved? Jake couldn't hide his disgust. You call this evolution? You've become monsters. We have become practical, Kess replied. In the old times, wars lasted for centuries because both sides followed rules about protecting civilians and treating prisoners with dignity. Billions died in those prolonged conflicts. Now, wars are quick and decisive. The strong win, the weak. Submit or die and the galaxy moves on. It is better this way. Jake realized he was looking at a civilization that had traded its soul for efficiency. They had forgotten what it meant to be truly alive, to stand for something greater than mere survival. That night, as the horizon prepared to leave Nexus Prime, Jake stood in his quarters and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, countless worlds full of beings who had forgotten how to hope, how to dream, how to sacrifice for something bigger than themselves. Sir? Dr. Carter's voice came through. Come, we're ready to depart. Do you want to set course for Earth? Jake thought about going home, about reporting what they had found to Earth Command. But something inside him rebelled against the idea of just walking away. Maybe humanity was different. Maybe they still remembered things this galaxy had forgotten. Not. Yet, Lisa, he said, I want to explore a little more. There's got to be someone out here who remembers what honor means. He had no idea that his wish was about to come true in the most unexpected way possible. 3 days after leaving Nexus Prime, the Horizon sensors picked up something unusual. They were traveling through the Crimson Nebula, a swirling mass of red and gold gases that stretched across several light years. Most ships avoided the area because the charged particles interfered with navigation systems, but Jake had ordered them to take the longer route. He needed time to think about what they had witnessed. Captain, I'm detecting artificial structures. Ahead, Dr. Carter called out from her station. It looks like a space station, but the design is unlike anything in our databases. Commander Blake moved to the tactical display. It's not showing up on any of the galactic charts we downloaded. Someone built this thing and then erased all records of it. Jake studied the image on the main screen. The station was enormous, easily the size of a small moon. Its architecture was different from the cold, efficient designs they had seen elsewhere in the galaxy. This structure had curves and flowing lines that seemed almost artistic. More importantly, it was sending out a weak distress signal. Life signs? Jake asked. Minimal, Carter replied. One life form, very faint. The station's power systems are almost completely down. Whoever's in there won't last much longer. Jake made his decision quickly. Blake, take a team and prepare for boarding. Carter, you're with them. I want to know what this place is and who built it. The boarding party suited up and took a shuttle across to the mysterious station. The docking bay was massive, designed to hold ships much larger than their small shuttle. Ancient symbols were carved into the walls, symbols that seemed to tell a story of warriors and battles fought long ago. Engineer Tony Rodriguez was the first to comment on what they found. Captain, this place is old, really old. The metal composition suggests it's been here for at least 3 centuries, maybe longer. They made their way through corridors that were clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. The walls were decorated with murals showing armored figures fighting against darkness. The figures carried weapons that glowed with inner light, and their faces showed determination and courage. Dr. Amy Foster, the team's medic, was studying her scanner readings. The life sign is getting stronger as we approach. It's coming from what looks like a medical bay or hibernation chamber. They found the chamber deep within the station's core. It was a room filled with advanced medical equipment, all of it focused on a single stasis pod in the center. Inside the pod was a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. It was roughly humanoid but covered in scales that shimmered with a deep green color. It wore armor that seemed to be made of the same material as the station itself, and a cross. Its chest was a symbol that looked like a star surrounded by a circle. "It's beautiful," Carter whispered. "Look at the craftsmanship of that armor. Every piece is perfect, but it's not just functional, it's art." Foster was running scans on the stasis pod. "The occupant is alive, but barely. The power systems are failing. If we don't do something soon, the life support will shut down completely." Rodriguez was already working on the power couplings. "I can reroute power from our shuttle to give this thing a boost, but I need about an hour to make the connections." While Rodriguez worked, the others explored more of the station. They found a library filled with data crystals, a training room with weapons that still hummed with energy, and a hall lined with portraits. Each portrait showed a different being, but all wore the same armor and bore the same symbol. Carter was the first to translate some of the ancient texts they found. "This is incredible. This place was built by something called the Star Paladins. They were some kind of knightly order that protected innocent people across the galaxy." Blake studied the weapons in the training room. "These aren't just tools of war. Look at the inscriptions on each one. They're covered in oaths and promises. These people swore to protect others even at the cost of their own lives." When Rodriguez finally got the power restored, the stasis pod began to open with a soft hiss. The being inside stirred slowly, its eyes opening to reveal intelligence and ancient sadness. It tried to speak, but its voice was weak from centuries of sleep. Foster immediately began medical treatment, while Carter worked to establish communication. It took several hours, but eventually they were able to understand each other. The being's name was Seer Gorath, and he was the last of the Star Paladins. His voice was deep and resonant, carrying the weight of unimaginable loss. "You are not of the known species," Gorath said, studying the humans with curious eyes. "What brings you to this forgotten place?" Jake had joined the boarding party once they confirmed the station was safe. "We're explorers from a world called Earth. We're trying to understand this galaxy, but everything we've found so far has been ... He struggled for words. "Cold," Gorath finished. "Yes, I know. The galaxy was not always thus. Once there was honor among the stars. Once there were those who stood between the darkness and the light." Gorath told them the story of the Star Paladins. They had been formed thousands of years ago when the galaxy was young and chaotic. Warriors from dozens of species had come together, united by a common belief that the strong should protect the weak. They had sworn oaths to defend the innocent, to speak truth in the face of lies, and to stand against injustice wherever they found it. "We were not perfect," Gorath said, his voice growing stronger as Foster's medical treatments took effect. "But we tried to be better than what came before. We built safe havens for refugees, protected trade routes from pirates, and intervened when the powerful oppressed the weak." Blake leaned forward. "What happened to you? Why are you the last?" Gorath's expression darkened. "The time of shadows. The galaxy grew tired of our interference. They said we were inefficient, that our codes of honor slowed down progress. Corporate interests and political powers united against us. They hunted us down one by one." Carter found records of the final battle in the station's archives. According to this, the last 1,000 Star Paladins made their stand on a world called Haven's Rest. They were protecting refugee camps from corporate raiders who wanted to harvest the planet's atmosphere. "We knew we could not win," Gorath said. But we had sworn oaths. We could not abandon those who trusted us to protect them, so we fought, and we died. Foster had been quietly working on Gorth's injuries while he spoke. You're hurt, old wounds, but they never healed properly. A reminder of failure, Gorth said. I escaped the final battle only because my brothers and sisters sacrificed themselves to give me time to reach this station. I have spent 3 centuries in stasis, waiting for death to claim me. Rodriguez looked up from the power systems he was repairing. Why didn't you just give up? Why keep yourself alive? Gorth's eyes met Jake's. Because somewhere in my heart, I hoped that someone would remember. That someone would come who still believed in something greater than mere survival. Jake felt something stir in his chest. You're talking about honor. About doing what's right even when it's hard. I am talking about being truly alive, Gorth replied. Your species interests me, humans. You speak of concepts the galaxy has forgotten. Tell me, do your people still believe in sacrifice for others? Blake nodded. Some do. We have soldiers who die protecting civilians, doctors who risk their lives to save patients, and ordinary people who help strangers without expecting anything in return. Gorth stood slowly, his armor gleaming in the restored lights. Then, perhaps, there is hope after all. Perhaps the Star Paladins need not remain extinct. Carter looked at the ancient warrior with growing excitement. You mean you could teach us? You could show us how to be like the old paladins? I could try, Gorth said. But the path is not easy. To be a Star Paladin means to put others before yourself. It means to stand against the darkness even when you stand alone. It means to remember honor when the galaxy has forgotten what the word means. Jake made a decision that would change everything. Then teach us. Show us how to bring honor back. To the stars? Gorth smiled for the first time in 3 centuries. Very well, humans. Let us see if your species can learn to be knights among the stars. Captain Jake Morrison sent a message to Earth Command that would change the course of human history. He requested permission to establish a training program for what he called stellar peacekeepers, under the guidance of Sir Gorth. The response came back 3 days later, and it was not what he had hoped for. Absolutely not, Admiral Patricia Hayes said through the secure communication channel. Captain Morrison, you are to return to Earth immediately. We cannot afford to antagonize the galactic powers by reviving some extinct military order. Jake stood in his ready room staring at the message display. Behind him, through the viewport, he could see the ancient station where Gorth waited. The old paladin had been patient, spending his time teaching the human crew about the history of the galaxy and the principles that had once guided the Star Paladins. With respect, Admiral, I believe this is exactly what the galaxy needs, Jake replied. These people have forgotten basic concepts of right and wrong. Maybe we can remind them. That's not our job, Captain. Our job is to establish trade relations and ensure Earth's survival in a hostile galaxy. Return home immediately. That's an order. Jake closed the communication channel and made the hardest decision of his career. He turned to his crew and explained the situation. To his surprise, every single person volunteered to stay and help. Establish the new Paladin order. You're all throwing away your careers, Jake warned them. Earth Command will brand us as rogues. Commander Blake spoke for the entire crew. Maybe some things are more important than careers, sir. We've seen what this galaxy has become. If we don't stand up for what's right, who will? The first human paladins were chosen carefully. Detective Maria Santos had joined the space service after losing her partner in a gang war on Earth. She had seen too much violence and wanted to find a way to protect people on a larger scale. When Gorth tested her resolve by showing her holographic recordings of the Paladin massacres, she didn't flinch. I've seen evil before, Maria said. The only thing that stops it is good people willing to fight back. Lieutenant Paul Davis was next. He had been a soldier before joining the space service, and he had lost his entire squad protecting a civilian convoy from raiders. The guilt had nearly broken him, but Gorth helped him understand that his sacrifice had meaning. Your friends died with honor, Gorth told him. They chose to stand between innocents and those who would harm them. That choice made them heroes, not victims. Dr. Kevin Wright was an unexpected choice. He was a physician, not a warrior, but Gorth explained that paladins were more than just fighters. A true paladin heals as much as he hurts, the old knight said. The galaxy needs those who can mend what has been broken. The training was intense. Gorth taught them the ancient codes that had guided the Star Paladins for millennia. They learned to fight with weapons that responded to their intentions rather than just their physical strength. They studied the history of dozens of species, learning to understand different cultures and ways of thinking. Most importantly, they learned the Paladin Oath. It was simple but profound. I swear to protect the innocent, to speak truth in the face of lies, to stand against injustice wherever I find it, and to remember that honor is not about being perfect, but about trying to be better than what came before. Their first mission came sooner than expected. A distress signal reached the station from a medical convoy that was being attacked by pirates. The convoy was carrying vaccines to a plague-stricken world, but 3 different criminal groups were trying to steal the cargo to sell on the black market. This is perfect, Gorth said as they prepared to leave. Not too dangerous for your first mission, but important enough to matter. The 5 new paladins took a modified shuttle that Rodriguez had equipped with some of the ancient weapons from the station. Maria Santos was designated as the mission leader, with Paul Davis as her second. Dr. Wright would handle any medical emergencies, while Blake and Carter provided technical support. The convoy was under heavy attack when they arrived. 2 merchant ships were already destroyed, and the remaining 3 were badly damaged. The pirates had superior numbers and firepower, but they weren't prepared for what the paladins brought to the fight. Maria's voice cut through the chaos. On the communication channels. This is Paladin Santos of the Star Paladin Order. You will cease your attack immediately and withdraw from this area. The pirate leader's response was mocking laughter. Star Paladins? They've been dead for 3 centuries. Who do you think? You're fooling? We're not fooling anyone, Maria replied calmly. We're giving you one chance to leave peacefully. After that, we'll remove you by force. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries. The Paladins fought with a combination of advanced technology and ancient principles. They disabled pirate ships rather than destroying them, giving the crews chances to surrender. When pirates tried to use convoy personnel as human shields, the Paladins found ways to rescue the hostages without causing unnecessary casualties. Paul Davis proved particularly skilled at the tactical aspects of the fight. He had studied the old Paladin battle techniques and adapted them for modern combat. His squad movements were precise and efficient, but always focused on minimizing harm to everyone involved. Dr. Wright worked frantically to save wounded convoy personnel while the battle raged around him. He treated pirates and merchants alike, following the Paladin principle that healing should never be dependent on politics or allegiances. The pirates were defeated within 2 hours. But not a single life was lost. The pirate survivors were taken prisoner and handed over to the convoy security forces. The medical supplies were delivered safely to the Plague World, where they saved thousands of lives. News of the battle spread quickly through the galactic communication networks. Most people dismissed it as propaganda or an elaborate hoax, but some began to wonder if the stories were true. Could the Star Paladins really have returned? Back on Nexus Prime, Overlord Kess received reports of the convoy incident with growing concern. The description of the human tactics troubled him. These weren't just soldiers fighting for pay or glory. They were fighting for principles that the galaxy had worked hard to forget. Find out everything you can about these so-called paladins. Kess ordered his intelligence officers. If they're real, they represent a threat to the order we've worked so hard to establish. Meanwhile, on worlds across the galaxy, ordinary people began to whisper about the humans who had brought back the old ways. Parents told their children stories they had heard from their grandparents about the time when knights traveled between the stars. Young people who had never known anything but cynicism and pragmatism began to wonder if there might be something more to life than just survival. The most unexpected response came from other species. A young Vortani engineer named Kala sent a message to the ancient station asking if she could join the Paladins. She was followed by another philosopher named Void Singer and a Zephyrian pilot who called himself Last Hope. "We cannot accept everyone who volunteers," Gorath warned Jake. "The training is difficult, and not all beings can overcome the conditioning of their societies." Jake looked at the growing list of volunteers. "But we have to try, don't we?" "Isn't that what being a paladin means?" Gorath smiled. "You are learning, human." "Yes, we try. We try to be better than what came before. We try to remember honor when the galaxy has forgotten. And sometimes, if we're very lucky, we inspire others to try as well." The ancient station began to come alive again as more beings arrived seeking training. The Star Paladins were reborn, and for the first time in centuries, the galaxy had reason to hope that honor might return to the stars. 6 months after the convoy rescue, the Star Paladins had grown from 5 humans to nearly 50 beings from across the galaxy. Their base on the ancient station had been expanded and rebuilt, with new training facilities and workshops where they created weapons and armor for the growing order. Word of their deeds spread like wildfire through the galactic networks. Captain Jake Morrison now bore the title of Paladin Commander, a rank that Gorath had created specifically for him. The old knight had explained that the Paladins needed someone who could bridge the gap between the ancient ways and the modern galaxy. Jake had proven himself capable of making the hard decisions that leadership required. Their next major mission came in the form of a desperate plea from the Outer Rim territories. A powerful crime syndicate run by corrupt Zephyrian nobles had been capturing beings from less advanced worlds and selling them as slaves. The galactic authorities ignored the problem because the syndicate paid substantial bribes to local officials. This is exactly the kind of injustice the old Paladins fought against, Gorath said as they studied the intelligence reports. The strong preying on the weak while those in power looked the other way. Paladin Maria Santos had been promoted to field commander after her success with the convoy mission. She studied the holographic displays showing the syndicate's operations. "They're holding prisoners on 3 different worlds. The main facility is on Korath Prime, but they've got processing centers on the moons of Vega 7 and Theta Station." Paul Davis had become the Paladin's tactical specialist. "We'll need to hit all 3 locations simultaneously. If we give them time to react, they'll start killing prisoners to cover their tracks." The mission was their most ambitious yet. 3 teams of Paladins would strike at the same time, coordinating their attacks across vast distances. Each team included both humans and aliens who had proven themselves worthy of the Paladin Oath. Santos led the assault on Korath Prime, the syndicate's headquarters. Her team included the Vortani engineer Kala, who had become skilled at disabling security systems, and a reformed pirate named Captain Rex, who knew the criminal underworld better than anyone. Davis took his squad to Vega 7, where hundreds of prisoners were being held in underground facilities. His team included Dr. Wright, who would be essential for treating the rescued victims, and Void Singer, the nether philosopher who had proven surprisingly effective in combat. The third team was led by Commander Blake, who had fully embraced the Paladin way of life. He would hit Theta Station with a group of newer recruits, giving them their first real taste of combat. The synchronized attack began at exactly 600 Galactic Standard Time. Santos and her team used stealth to infiltrate the main facility on Korath Prime. The Syndicate's security was designed to keep prisoners in, not to keep determined Paladins out. They moved through the corridors like ghosts, using non-lethal weapons to disable guards and security systems. When they reached the main detention center, they found hundreds of beings from dozens of species, all crammed into cells barely large enough for half their number. "My God," Kala whispered as they began opening the cells. "How can anyone do this to other living beings?" Santos helped a young Zephyrian female to her feet. The prisoner looked at her with confusion and fear. "Who are you? Are you with the Syndicate?" "We're Star Paladins," Santos said gently. "We're here to take you home?" The prisoner's eyes widened. "Star Paladins? But they're just stories, myths from the old times." Not anymore, Santos replied. The old ways have returned. Meanwhile, Davis was having a harder time on Vega 7. The underground facilities were heavily defended, and the Syndicate's forces were fighting back with everything they had. The Paladins advanced slowly but steadily, using their training to minimize casualties on both sides. Remember, Davis called to his team over the CUM system, we're not here to kill. We're here to save lives and bring justice. Dr. Wright was treating wounded prisoners as fast as the Paladins could reach them. Many had been tortured or experimented on by the Syndicate scientists. His medical supplies were running low, but he refused to stop working. These people have suffered enough, Wright said as he worked on a critically injured Nether. We're not leaving anyone behind. Blake's team at Theta Station encountered the most resistance. The station's commander had decided to fight to the death rather than surrender to what he called primitive idealists. The battle was fierce, but the Paladins' training and superior technology eventually won the day. When all 3 missions were complete, they had freed over 800 prisoners and captured dozens of Syndicate members. More importantly, they had seized the Syndicate's financial records, which revealed the full extent of their corruption network. Jake made the decision to broadcast the evidence across the entire galaxy. Every major news network received detailed files showing exactly how the slave trade operated and which officials had been taking bribes to ignore it. The response was explosive. For the first time in centuries, ordinary beings across the galaxy rose up in protest. They demanded action from their governments. They called for justice for the victims. They praised the Star Paladins for doing what their leaders would not. On Nexus Prime, Overlord Kess watched the protests with growing alarm. The humans had done more than just rescue some slaves. They had awakened something that had been sleeping in the galactic population for generations. The Paladins are becoming a symbol, his intelligence chief reported. People are starting to believe that change is possible. That's dangerous for us, Kess nodded grimly. More dangerous than you know. If people start believing in honor and justice again, our entire system of control will collapse. The Syndicate members who had been captured were put on trial in a public court that Jake had established on the ancient station. The proceedings were broadcast live across the galaxy, showing beings from all species working together to ensure that justice was served. The trials revealed the full horror of what the Syndicate had done. Families torn apart, children sold to the highest bidder, entire communities destroyed to feed the slave trade. The evidence was overwhelming and the verdicts were swift, but the Paladins' justice was tempered with mercy. Instead of executing the Syndicate leaders, they sentenced them to work in rehabilitation programs, helping to rebuild the communities they had destroyed. It was a concept that shocked the galaxy where criminals were usually simply eliminated. You show them mercy? Asked a Zephyrian reporter during one of the broadcasts. Even after all they've done, Jake answered the question himself. Justice. Without mercy is just revenge. We're trying to build something better than what came before. The impact of the slave trade liberation rippled across the galaxy. Young beings who had never known anything but cynicism began to volunteer for the Paladins in increasing numbers. Established governments found themselves facing protests and demands for reform. More importantly, other groups began to form, inspired by the Paladins' example. Relief organizations, reform movements, and volunteer militias all sprang up, united by the belief that ordinary beings could make a difference. Gorath watched these developments with satisfaction. You have done well, humans. You have not just rescued prisoners, you have rescued hope itself. Jake stood on the observation deck of the station looking out at the stars. This is just the beginning, isn't it? We've started something that's going to change everything. Change is never easy, Gorath replied. Those who profit from the current system will not give up their power without a fight. The real test is still to come. As if to confirm his words, long-range sensors began detecting massive fleet movements throughout the galaxy. The major powers were mobilizing their forces, and intelligence reports suggested they were forming an alliance for the first time in centuries. The Star Paladins had become too successful, too inspiring, too dangerous to ignore. The galaxies. Rulers had decided that the time had come to crush the growing rebellion before it could spread any further. Jake felt a chill as he read the latest intelligence reports. The forces arrayed against them were overwhelming, but then he remembered the faces of the prisoners they had freed, the hope in their eyes when they learned that someone still cared about justice. "Let them come," he said quietly. "We'll show them that honor is worth fighting for." The trap was perfectly designed and absolutely ruthless. Intelligence reports reached the Paladin station about a humanitarian crisis on the frontier world of Kepler 442b. A massive earthquake had destroyed 3 major cities, and millions of survivors were trapped without food, water, or medical supplies. The local government was corrupt and incompetent, refusing to allow aid ships to land because they wanted to steal the relief supplies for themselves. "This is exactly what we're meant to do," Paladin Maria Santos said as she studied the emergency reports. "Innocent people are dying while politicians play games with their lives." Commander Blake nodded in agreement. "The suffering is real according to all our sources. Satellite images confirmed the earthquake damage, and we're picking up thousands of distress signals from the surface." Jake Morrison, now fully accepting his role as Paladin commander, felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Every instinct told him to respond immediately, but something about the situation bothered him. The crisis was almost too perfect, hitting every point that would force the Paladins to act. "What do our intelligence sources say about enemy fleet movements?" Jake asked. Paul Davis consulted his tactical displays. "Nothing unusual, sir. The major powers have been mobilizing their forces, but they're still scattered across their home territories. This world is in neutral space, far from any military installations." Dr. Wright was already preparing medical supplies for the relief mission. "Commander, every hour we delay means more people die. Whatever our concerns about enemy activity, we can't let innocent civilians suffer while we debate strategy." Seer Gorath had been unusually quiet during the planning session. The ancient paladin's instincts had been sharpened by centuries of warfare, and he sensed something wrong about the entire situation. But even he could not argue with the evidence of genuine suffering. "My students," Gorath said finally, "you have learned the lessons of honor and duty well. Perhaps too well. Sometimes the greatest trap is one that uses our own virtue against us." Jake understood what his mentor was saying, but the choice was clear. "We can't ignore people in need just because we're suspicious. That would make us no better than the galaxy we're trying to change." The decision was made to deploy the entire Paladin force to Kepler 442b. Every trained Paladin, along with their support ships and medical supplies, would make the journey to the disaster zone. It was the largest humanitarian mission they had ever attempted. The journey took 3 days through hyperspace. During the trip, more reports came in about the worsening situation on the planet. Disease was spreading through the refugee camps, and violent storms were making rescue operations nearly impossible. The Paladins pushed their ships harder, desperate to reach the survivors in time. They dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system and immediately began scanning for the best approach to the planet. The earthquake damage was visible even from orbit, with entire cities reduced to rubble and massive dust clouds covering half the continent. "Beginning descent to the primary disaster zone," Santos reported from her ship. "Initial scans show thousands of life signs in the affected areas." That was when the trap was sprung. Ships began appearing from behind the planet's moons, rising from the asteroid field and dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Within minutes, the Paladins found themselves surrounded by the largest military fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Overlord Kess's voice filled the communication channels, cold and triumphant. "Star Paladins, you are surrounded and outnumbered 100 to 1. Surrender immediately or be destroyed." Jake felt his heart sink as he realized the magnitude of the betrayal. "The humanitarian crisis? Quite real," Kess replied. "We simply ensured that it would happen at the right time and place. A few seismic charges in the right locations, and nature provided the rest. The suffering you see is genuine, which made it the perfect bait." The Zephyrian, Vortani, and Nether fleets had formed a sphere around the Paladins, trapping them in a space barely large enough for maneuvering. Escape was impossible, and fighting seemed hopeless against such overwhelming odds, Blake checked his tactical readouts with growing despair. Sir, we're looking at over 3,000 enemy ships. Our entire force wouldn't last 10 minutes in a straight fight. But Jake was not thinking about fighting. He was thinking about the people on the planet below, the genuine victims who were suffering while the galaxy's powers used their pain as a weapon. All Paladin ships, begin immediate descent to the planet's surface, he ordered. Our mission hasn't changed. There are people down there who need our help. Commander, that's suicide, Davis protested. The enemy fleet will destroy us the moment we break formation. Maybe, Jake replied, but we swore an oath to protect the innocent. That oath doesn't have exceptions for when it's convenient or safe. Garth's voice came through the comm system, filled with pride and sadness. My students have learned well. You choose honor even in the face of certain death. This is what it means to be a true Paladin. The Paladin ships began their descent toward the planet, knowing they were flying into almost certain destruction, but something unexpected happened. As they moved toward the surface, other ships began to follow them. A Vortani cruiser broke formation and moved to protect the Paladins. Flank! Its captain's voice crackled over the radio. I did not join the fleet to watch warriors die for helping earthquake victims. A squadron of Zephyrian fighters peeled away from their formation and began escorting the Paladin medical ships. Their commander transmitted simply, "My daughter is on that planet. You will not stop those who come to help her." Even some nether vessels abandoned their positions, their crews refusing to fire on beings who were risking their lives for strangers. The enemy fleet began to fracture as individual commanders and crews decided they could not participate in what was happening. But there were still more than enough ships loyal to the galactic powers to complete their mission. The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The Paladins fought not to win, but to buy time for their medical teams, to reach the survivors on the planet. Every ship that fell, every life that was lost, was a sacrifice made to save strangers they had never met. Gorth piloted his personal fighter with the skill of centuries, weaving through enemy fire to protect the slower medical transports. His ship was ancient but deadly, and his weapons carved through the enemy formations like a sword through darkness. My young knights, he transmitted to the other Paladins, today we show the galaxy what honor truly means. We do not fight for glory or victory. We fight so that others might live. The old Paladin's ship was badly damaged, its shields failing and its weapon systems offline. He could have ejected, could have saved himself to fight another day. Instead, he turned his fighter toward the largest enemy battleship and pushed his engines to maximum power. Gorth, no! Jake shouted over the comm, but it was too late. The ancient warrior's ship struck the enemy flagship like a meteor, its power core detonating in a brilliant flash that lit up the entire battle space. The explosion tore through the battleship's hull and sent shockwaves through the surrounding fleet. But more importantly, it gave the remaining Paladins the opening they needed. While the enemy fleet reeled from the loss of their command ship, the Paladin medical transports reached the planet's surface and began their rescue operations. Dr. Wright was among the first to land, immediately setting up field hospitals in the disaster zones. Santos led security teams that protected the medical workers from looters and criminals who were trying to take advantage of the chaos. The Paladins saved thousands of lives that day, but the cost was terrible. Half their fleet was destroyed, and many of their best knights were dead or missing. Worst of all, they had lost Gorth, the last link to the original star Paladins. As the survivors regrouped in the planet's capital city, Jake held the ancient seal that Gorth had given him before the battle. The old Paladin had somehow known this day would come and had prepared for it. He made me promise to carry on, Jake told the assembled Paladins. To remember that being a knight isn't about winning battles, it's about being willing to lose them for the right reasons. Blake looked at the ruins around them and the enemy ships still circling overhead. So what do we do now? We're trapped here, outnumbered, and cut off from our base. Jake stood and looked at his surviving knights, beings from dozens of species who had chosen honor over safety, duty over survival. Now we do what paladins have always done. We find another way to keep fighting for what's right. The great betrayal had cost them dearly, but it had also shown the galaxy something important. There were still beings willing to die for strangers. Still those who remembered what honor meant. The Star Paladins had been bloodied but not broken, and their example would inspire others to take up the fight for justice among the stars. The galaxy celebrated the destruction of the Star Paladins, but their victory lasted only 3 months. What the galactic powers had not expected was that Gorth's sacrifice and the Paladins' courage at Kepler 442b would become the spark that ignited a revolution across thousands of worlds on Vortani Prime. Crystal workers who had watched their colleagues die in mining accidents while bosses counted profits suddenly refused to work in unsafe conditions. On Zephyrian colonies, soldiers questioned orders to fire on protesters who demanded better treatment. On nether gas refineries, engineers sabotaged equipment rather than participate in the poisoning of inhabited worlds. The recordings of the battle had spread through every communication network in the galaxy. Beings who had never heard of honor before watched human and alien paladins die to save earthquake victims they had never met. The old warrior Gorth's final charge became a symbol of courage that inspired millions. Commander Blake, now calling himself Paladin Commander after Jake Morrison, had been declared the new Grand Master of the Order, operated from hidden bases scattered across the outer rim. The surviving Paladins had learned to work in small cells, training new recruits while staying ahead of the galactic authorities. "We lost the battle, but we're winning the war," Blake reported during a secret meeting of Paladin leaders. "Every week brings more volunteers. Every day brings new reports of people standing up to corruption and injustice." Maria Santos had become the leader of recruitment and training operations. Her network now spanned dozens of systems, with training camps hidden in asteroid fields, abandoned stations, and remote moons. The new Paladins came from every species and every walk of life. A Zephyrian factory worker named Buzzclick just completed Paladin training, Santos reported. He wants to return to his homeworld to organize the other workers. A Vortani artist called Crystal Song has been teaching our codes to young people through her sculptures. Even some nether philosophers are spreading our ideas through their meditation networks. Jake Morrison had grown into his role as Grandmaster, but the responsibility weighed heavily on him. He carried Gorth's ancient seal and tried to honor the memory of the old Paladin who had given everything to save strangers. The Paladins needed him to be strong, but sometimes he wondered if they were fighting a war they could never win. Dr. Wright had established a medical network that provided free healthcare to beings across the galaxy. His clinics were often the only places where different species could receive treatment without discrimination. The galactic authorities tried to shut them down, but new ones appeared faster than they could be destroyed. The turning point came when intelligence reports revealed that Overlord Kess was planning something called the Final Solution. The galactic powers had decided that the Paladin movement was too dangerous to contain. They would eliminate every world, every station, every ship that had shown sympathy for the Paladins' cause. "They're talking about billions of deaths," Davis reported from his intelligence post. Entire systems would be sterilized to make sure no trace of Paladin influence remains. Jake made the hardest decision of his life. The Paladins would have to abandon their guerrilla tactics and take the fight directly to the heart of the galactic government. It was almost certainly suicide, but it was the only way to prevent the mass murder that Kess was planning, the assault on Nexus Prime began with simultaneous attacks across 50 systems. Paladin cells emerged from hiding and struck at military installations, communication hubs, and government facilities. But these were diversions. The real attack was aimed at the capital world itself. Jake led the space battle personally, commanding a fleet of captured enemy ships and vessels donated by sympathetic military officers who had joined the cause. The enemy fleet was enormous, But many of its crews were unwilling to fight against people they secretly admired. Santos commanded the ground assault with an army of volunteers from across the galaxy. Factory workers, farmers, students, and merchants fought alongside trained paladins, united by their belief that things could be better than they were. The battle for Nexus Prime lasted 3 days. The paladins fought not with hatred but with determination, always offering their enemies the chance to surrender. When government forces used civilian areas for cover, the paladins found ways to fight around them rather than through them. The decisive moment came when Overlord Kess ordered his remaining forces to begin orbital bombardment of the capital cities. Civilian districts. He would rather destroy everything than lose control. That order finally broke the loyalty of his own military commanders. Admiral Vex, the Zephyrian fleet commander, refused the order and turned his ships against Kess's flagship. Captain Mora of the Vortani battle group followed suit. Even the nether vessels abandoned their positions rather than participate in the slaughter of innocents. Kess found himself alone and surrounded, his power crumbling as his own people abandoned him. When Paladin forces breached his command center, he was ranting about efficiency and order while his empire collapsed around him. Jake Morrison stood before the fallen overlord and felt no satisfaction in the victory. "You could have been a leader," he said sadly. "You could have helped make things better. Instead, you chose to make them worse." The establishment of the new Galactic Republic took months of careful negotiation. Representatives from hundreds of worlds gathered to write a new constitution based on the principles the Paladins had fought for. The document enshrined the rights of all sentient beings and established protections for the weak against the strong. Jake's speech to the new Galactic Senate became known as the Honor Proclamation. "We did not bring you something new," he said to the assembled delegates. "We simply reminded you of what you had forgotten. Honor was never dead. It was only sleeping, waiting for someone to wake it up." The Star Paladins became the official peacekeeping force of the new republic, but their role was different from what it had been. They were no longer rebels fighting against injustice. They were guardians helping to build a better future. Blake established new training academies on dozens of worlds, teaching young beings the principles of honor, courage, and sacrifice. Santos created a network of hospitals and schools that served beings regardless of their species or social status. Wright developed new medical technologies that were shared freely with all worlds. The galaxy was not perfect. There were still conflicts, still people who chose selfishness over service, but there was also hope. Children grew up learning that they could make a difference, that ordinary beings could become heroes if they chose to stand up for what was right. Jake often stood in the memorial chamber they had built for Goroth and the other paladins who had died in the struggle. Their names were carved in stone from every world in the galaxy, and their oath was written in letters of gold. "I swear to protect the innocent, to speak truth in the face of lies, to stand against injustice wherever I find it." New paladins took that oath every day, beings from species that had once been enemies now working together to protect the peace they had all helped to create. The age of cynicism was over, and the age of heroes had begun anew. On the first anniversary of the Battle of Nexus Prime, Jake received a message from Earth. Admiral Hayes, who had once ordered him to abandon his mission, now requested permission to establish a Paladin training academy in the Sol System. "Humanity gave the galaxy back its honor," her message read. "Now we want to learn from what we helped create." Jake smiled as he read the words. Goroth had been right all along. Honor had never truly died. It had just been waiting for someone to remember what it meant to be a knight among the stars.